Every Tuesday and Friday at exactly 1:15 p.m., the small bell above the door of Sunshine Diner would ring. Marcus Williams would look up from wiping tables to see the same customer entering, Miss Eleanor Thomas, a 67-year-old woman in a wheelchair. Marcus was 28 years old and had been working at Sunshine Diner for almost 5 years now. With his warm smile and quick service, he was popular with the regular customers. But there was something special about Ms. Thomas. "Good afternoon, Ms. Thomas," Marcus would say, already moving to prepare her usual table near the window. "Beautiful day today, isn't it?" Ms. Thomas had multiple sclerosis, a condition that affected her nerve cells and made it difficult for her to move her legs. Some days were better than others. On good days, she would wheel herself to the table, her silver hair neatly pinned back, wearing one of her colorful scarves. On bad days, Marcus would notice her hands shaking as she tried to control her wheelchair. "Need any help today, ma'am?" Marcus would ask on those harder days, careful not to make her feel helpless. "Just a little push would be wonderful, Marcus," she would reply with dignity. These old arms aren't what they used to be. Their routine was simple. Miss Thomas always ordered the same meal, vegetable soup to start, then the chicken salad sandwich with no onions and a side of coleslaw. Marcus would bring her food quickly, making sure to place everything within easy reach. What most customers didn't know was that Marcus was working 2 jobs while studying part-time at the local community college. His mother had gotten sick 3 years ago, and his younger sister Tanya was still in high school. As the oldest child, Marcus had put his own dreams on hold to help support his family. "How are your classes going?" Miss Thomas asked one Friday, surprising Marcus. He didn't remember telling her about his education. "They're going okay," he answered, refilling her water glass. "How did you know I was in school?" Miss Thomas smiled. "I notice your textbooks sometimes, peeking out from under the counter. English literature, if I'm not mistaken." Marcus nodded, feeling a connection forming. "I'm hoping to be a teacher someday." "Well, that's wonderful," she said, her eyes lighting up. "I was an English professor for 30 years before I retired." From that day, their brief interactions grew longer. Marcus would spend his short breaks sitting at Miss Thomas's table, listening to her stories about famous writers or discussing books he was reading for class. The other waiters noticed but didn't mind covering for him for a few minutes. What no one at the diner knew was that Ms. Thomas lived alone in a small apartment 3 blocks away. Her husband had died 10 years earlier, and they never had children. Her only living relative was a nephew who lived across the country and rarely called. The diner became more than just a place to eat for Ms. Thomas. It became a place where someone remembered her name, saved her favorite table, and treated her with respect rather than pity. One rainy Tuesday, the diner was almost empty. Miss Thomas arrived looking more tired than usual. "Everything okay, Miss Thomas?" Marcus asked as he helped her to her table. "Just feeling my age today, dear," she replied with a small sigh, but seeing a friendly face makes it better. Marcus didn't know it then, but this simple routine, this connection between a young black waiter and an elderly disabled woman, would change both their lives forever. Neither could have guessed that after years of these regular visits, a single note would turn their ordinary friendship into something extraordinary. As the seasons changed, Marcus and Ms. Thomas's friendship grew stronger. Marcus began to notice small details about her that other servers missed. On days when her hands trembled more than usual, he would quietly cut her sandwich into smaller pieces before serving it. When the weather turned cold, he made sure her tea was extra hot and brought a small pitcher of hot water to keep it warm throughout her meal. One Tuesday in November, Miss Thomas didn't show up at her usual time. Marcus kept glancing at the door, checking his watch. By 2:00 p.m., he felt worried. "Hey, has anyone seen Miss Thomas today?" he asked his coworker Julie. "The lady in the wheelchair?" "No, not today," Julie replied, rushing past with a tray of burgers. When Friday came and Miss Thomas still didn't appear, Marcus felt genuinely concerned. After his shift ended, he decided to ask his manager for help. "Do we have contact information for Miss Thomas? She hasn't been in all week, and I'm worried something might have happened to her," Marcus explained. The manager, Mr. Peterson, checked the diner's records. "We don't have phone numbers for our regular customers, Marcus. Maybe she's just on vacation." Marcus shook his head. "She always tells me if she's going to be away. Something doesn't feel right." That weekend, instead of studying for his upcoming exam, Marcus found himself walking to the apartment building where he knew Ms. Thomas lived. He had helped her home once during a heavy rainstorm, so he remembered the address. Standing in front of the old brick building, he felt nervous. Was he overstepping his boundaries? Just as he was about to leave, an elderly man exited the building. "Excuse me, sir," Marcus called out. "I'm looking for Ms. Eleanor Thomas. She's a regular at the diner where I work, and she hasn't been in this week." The man nodded with recognition. "Oh, Eleanor? She's been in the hospital. Fell in her apartment last Monday. My wife visited her yesterday at City General." Marcus felt his heart sink. "Is she okay?" "Broke her hip? Poor thing. At her age, that's serious business." The next day, Marcus used his only day off to visit City General Hospital. He bought a small bunch of yellow daisies. He had noticed they were her favorite when she once commented on the diner's fresh flower arrangements. When he reached her room, he found Ms. Thomas looking small and fragile in the hospital bed, her face pale against the white pillows. "Marcus?" Her surprise was evident in her voice. "How did you find me?" "I was worried when you didn't come to the diner," he explained, placing the flowers on her bedside table. "I hope it's okay that I came to check on you." Miss Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "In all my years, I never expected." She paused, overcome with emotion. "Thank you." They talked for almost an hour. Miss Thomas explained that she had fallen while trying to reach a book on a high shelf. The doctors told her she would need several weeks of rehabilitation before she could return home. "I'm not sure how I'll manage on my own after this," she admitted. "My nephew offered to help, but he has his own family to care for in California." Marcus hesitated before speaking. "My mom was sick a few years back. I learned a lot about home care then. Maybe I could help sometimes after my shifts." Ms. Thomas studied his face. "Why would you do that for me, Marcus? You're just my waiter." Marcus smiled gently. "No, Ms. Thomas, I think we're friends now." What Marcus didn't say was how much their brief conversations meant to him. How her encouragement about his studies had kept him going when he felt like giving up. How her stories about teaching had strengthened his own dream of becoming an educator. As he left the hospital, Marcus didn't know that his simple act of kindness had affected Ms. Thomas deeply. That night, alone in her hospital room, she made a decision that would later change both their lives forever. 3 weeks passed before Ms. Thomas returned to Sunshine Diner. Marcus spotted her immediately as she wheeled through the door, moving slower than before. He rushed over to help her. "Miss Thomas, it's so good to see you back," he said, genuine happiness in his voice. "Hello, dear Marcus," she replied with a tired smile. "I've missed this place. Hospital food is simply dreadful." Marcus guided her to her usual table, noticing she winced slightly as she adjusted herself in her wheelchair. A metal cane hung from the side of her chair, something new. He didn't mention it. "The usual today?" he asked. "Yes, please, and perhaps some extra napkins. My hands aren't as steady as they once were." As Marcus prepared her order, his manager pulled him aside. "You've been visiting that old lady in the hospital, haven't you?" Marcus nodded, suddenly worried he had broken some rule. Mr. Peterson's face softened. "My wife works at City General. She told me what you did. That was good of you, son." Marcus felt relief wash over him. "She's a special customer, sir. Take your time with her today. We're not busy." When Marcus brought Ms. Thomas her food, he noticed she was having trouble with her purse. Without making a fuss, he pulled up a chair. "Need some help?" "My arthritis is acting up today," she admitted. "Could you help me find my reading glasses? I brought something to show you." Marcus helped her search through her purse until they found the glasses case. Once she put them on, Miss Thomas carefully removed a folded paper from her pocket. "I want to show you something, Marcus. During my hospital stay, I had a lot of time to think." She unfolded the paper. It was a brochure for the local university. "You mentioned once that you wished you could transfer there to finish your teaching degree." Marcus nodded, surprised she remembered. "Yes, but the tuition is too expensive. Community college is all I can afford right now." "What if that changed?" Miss Thomas asked quietly. "I spoke with an old colleague of mine who still teaches there. There's a scholarship for non-traditional students that you might qualify for." Marcus stared at her, stunned. "You get that for me?" You visited me in the hospital when my own family didn't, she said simply. The application deadline is next month. Promise me you'll apply. That conversation changed something between them. Their friendship deepened beyond the usual customer-server relationship. Marcus began sharing more about his struggles, how he worried about his mother's health, how his sister Tanya needed braces but they couldn't afford them, how tired he felt working double shifts. Ms. Thomas listened with genuine interest. Sometimes she offered advice, but mostly she just listened. When Marcus mentioned needing books for his classes that weren't available at the library, she would mysteriously find copies that she no longer needed and pass them to him. 2 months after her hospital stay, Miss Thomas arrived at the diner looking excited. I have news, she said as Marcus set down her soup. I've decided to start tutoring again. Just 1 or 2 students, to keep my mind sharp. That's wonderful, Marcus replied. And, she continued, lowering her voice, I've been speaking with Mr. Peterson. He tells me you're having trouble keeping up with your classes because of your work schedule. Marcus felt his face grow warm. It's been challenging. Well, I could use some help around my apartment. Nothing too demanding, just grocery shopping, changing light bulbs, things I can't easily do anymore. I'd pay you, of course. The hours would be flexible around your classes. Marcus understood what she was really offering, a way for him to earn money while having more time for his education. It wasn't charity, it was an opportunity. I think we could arrange something, Miss Thomas, he said quietly. Neither of them could have predicted how this arrangement would lead to even more significant changes in their lives, or that a simple note would one day reveal Miss Thomas's true intentions. Spring arrived, bringing warm sunshine and fresh flowers to the city streets. Marcus now split his time between the diner, his classes, and helping Miss Thomas at her apartment twice a week. He would shop for groceries, change light bulbs, and reach books from high shelves. Sometimes he would read to her when her eyes felt tired. One Wednesday afternoon, Marcus arrived at Miss Thomas's apartment to find her sorting through old photographs spread across her dining table. Come look at these, Marcus, she called as he entered with her groceries. I've been digging through my past. Marcus set down the bags and joined her at the table. The photos showed a younger Eleanor Thomas standing proudly in front of university buildings, receiving awards, and surrounded by smiling students. Is that you? Marcus asked, picking up a black and white photo of a young woman with a bright smile, standing next to a tall, handsome man. Yes, that's me and my husband, Richard. Her voice grew softer. We were both professors at the university. This was taken the day we both received tenure. Marcus studied the photo carefully. You look so happy. We were, she replied. We had big dreams. We wanted to start a scholarship fund for promising students who couldn't afford college. Richard and I never had children, you see. We planned to use our savings to help students instead. She paused, running her fingers over the photo. But then Richard got sick. Cancer. The medical bills took everything. He died 20 years ago. Marcus had never heard her talk about her husband before. I'm sorry. Don't be, she said firmly. We had 30 wonderful years together. That's more than many people get. As Marcus put away her groceries, Miss Thomas continued sorting through photos. She stopped at one showing a group of young black students gathered around her desk. This was my favorite class, she said, handing him the photo. 1974. These students faced so many challenges, but they all graduated. This young man here, she pointed to a tall student in the center, came from a poor family, just like you. He became a successful writer, and this young woman became a judge. Marcus studied the faces, feeling a strange connection to these students from long ago. What made them special? They had drive, just like you, Ms. Thomas said. But they'd also had people who believed in them. Sometimes that's all the difference. Later that evening, as Marcus prepared to leave, Miss Thomas handed him an envelope. What's this? He asked. Open it, she said simply. Inside was an acceptance letter to the scholarship program she had encouraged him to apply for. He had been awarded a partial scholarship to the university. Miss Thomas, he exclaimed. I got it. Of course you did, she smiled. I never doubted it for a moment. Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes. This will cover half my tuition. I can actually do this now. What Marcus didn't know was that Ms. Thomas had made a phone call to her old colleague, sharing Marcus's story and vouching for his character. She hadn't guaranteed his acceptance, but she had made sure his application received proper attention. "You deserve this opportunity, Marcus," she said. "Now you can reduce your hours at the diner and focus more on your studies." That night, as Marcus shared the news with his mother and sister, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope for the future. His mother hugged him tightly. "This Ms. Thomas sounds like an angel," she said. "She's just a customer who became a friend," Marcus replied. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. Miss Thomas had become a mentor, a guide, someone who saw potential in him that he sometimes struggled to see in himself. What Marcus couldn't know was that Ms. Thomas was keeping a secret. Her health was declining faster than she let on. The fall had complicated her multiple sclerosis, and her doctor had given her news she hadn't shared with anyone. As she watched Marcus's life beginning to change for the better, she was quietly making plans that would change his life even more dramatically. Summer arrived with intense heat that made everyone at Sunshine Diner grateful for the air conditioning. Marcus now worked only 3 days a week at the diner, spending more time at Ms. Thomas's apartment and preparing for his transfer to the university in the fall. His manager had been understanding about reducing his hours, especially after Ms. Thomas had a private conversation with him one afternoon. One hot July day, Marcus arrived at Ms. Thomas's apartment to find her looking more tired than usual. Her face seemed paler, and she moved her wheelchair with visible effort. "Are you feeling okay today?" Marcus asked, concerned. "Just the heat, dear," she replied, waving away his worry. "And perhaps I didn't sleep well. Would you mind making us some iced tea?" As Marcus prepared the drinks in her small kitchen, he noticed a pile of papers on her counter next to an open address book. He wasn't trying to snoop, but he couldn't help seeing the heading on one document: Last Will and Testament. When he returned with the tea, Miss Thomas was looking out the window, lost in thought. "Marcus," she said without turning around, "do you remember when we first really talked at the diner? Not just orders and pleasantries, but our first real conversation?" Marcus smiled. "Of course. You noticed my textbook and told me you used to be a professor." "Yes," she nodded slowly. "Do you know why I started coming to that diner in the first place?" Marcus realized he had never thought about it. The diner wasn't particularly special, and it wasn't the closest restaurant to her apartment. "I'm not sure," he admitted. Miss Thomas turned her wheelchair to face him. "It was because the other places made me feel invisible. The waiters would talk over my head, ask my companions what she wanted instead of asking me directly. But the first time I came to Sunshine Diner, you looked me in the eye. You spoke to me, not at me or around me." Marcus hadn't realized how much that simple act of respect had meant to her. "My husband Richard used to say that character shows in how people treat those they don't need to impress," she continued. "He would have liked you very much, Marcus." She wheeled herself to a bookshelf and pulled out a leather-bound book. "I want you to have this. It belonged to Richard." Marcus took the book carefully. It was a first edition of To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. "Ms. Thomas, I can't accept this. It must be valuable." "That's precisely why I want you to have it," she insisted. "Books should be treasured by people who understand their worth." That afternoon, they talked for hours. Miss Thomas shared stories about her teaching years, her travels with Richard, and the students whose lives she had touched. Marcus noticed she spoke as if she was making sure these stories wouldn't be forgotten. Before Marcus left, Miss Thomas held his hand a moment longer than usual. "Marcus, there's something I need to tell you," she began, her voice serious. Just then, her phone rang. She answered it, and Marcus could tell from her expression that something was wrong. "I have to take this," she said. "It's my doctor. Can we talk tomorrow?" "Of course," Marcus assured her. "I'll come by after my shift." The next day, Marcus arrived at Ms. Thomas's apartment building to find an ambulance parked outside. His heart raced as he rushed inside. The building manager was in the hallway, looking worried. "What happened?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Ms. Thomas collapsed this morning," the manager explained. "The home health aide found her when she arrived for her weekly check-in." "Which hospital did they take her to?" Marcus was already pulling out his phone. "City General. Are you family?" Marcus hesitated. "No, I'm her friend." As the ambulance drove away, Marcus didn't know that the conversation Ms. Thomas wanted to have with him would never take place. The secret she had been keeping about her health, about her plans, about the future, would have to be revealed in another way. And that revelation would come in the form of a note that would change everything. The hospital waiting room was crowded with people, but Marcus felt completely alone. He had been sitting there for 3 hours, waiting for any news about Ms. Thomas. The nurses wouldn't tell him anything because he wasn't family. "I'm sorry, but only family members can receive updates on Ms. Thomas's condition," a nurse explained for the third time. "Please," Marcus begged. "She doesn't have any family nearby. I'm the closest thing she has to family in this city." The nurse's expression softened slightly. "Let me see what I can do." While waiting, Marcus called his mother to explain why he wouldn't be home for dinner. He also called Mr. Peterson at the diner to say he couldn't work tomorrow. "Take all the time you need, son," Mr. Peterson said. "Ms. Thomas is special to all of us." Just as Marcus was about to try asking another nurse for information, a doctor in a white coat approached him. "Are you Marcus Williams?" the doctor asked. Marcus stood up quickly. "Yes, that's me. How is Ms. Thomas?" "I'm Dr. Sharma," the doctor said, extending his hand. "Ms. Thomas is stable but in serious condition. She had a stroke, which was likely caused by complications from her multiple sclerosis." "A stroke?" Marcus felt his chest tighten. "Will she be okay?" Dr. Sharma's face remained professional but kind. "Ms. Thomas is currently conscious but weak. She's been asking for you, which is why I came to find you. Normally, we only allow family visits, but she was quite insistent." Marcus followed Dr. Sharma through the hospital corridors, his heart pounding. When they reached Ms. Thomas's room, Marcus paused at the doorway. She looked so small in the hospital bed, surrounded by beeping machines. Her usually neatly styled silver hair was spread across the pillow, and her face looked thin and pale. "Miss Thomas?" Marcus said softly as he approached her bed. Her eyes fluttered open, and a small smile formed on her lips. "Marcus," she whispered. "You came." "Of course I came," he replied, carefully taking her hand. It felt cold and fragile in his. "How are you feeling?" "I've been better," she said with a weak attempt at humor. "I'm sorry about our conversation yesterday. I meant to tell you something important." "Don't worry about that now," Marcus said. "Just focus on getting better." Miss Thomas shook her head slightly. "No, this can't wait. In my apartment, there's a blue folder in the top drawer of my desk. I need you to get it." "Miss Thomas, please, Marcus," she interrupted, her voice suddenly stronger. "The building manager has a spare key. Tell them I sent you." Marcus nodded, seeing how important this was to her. "I'll go right now." "Thank you," she said, squeezing his hand weakly. "And Marcus, no matter what happens, remember that you have changed my life for the better." Those words stayed with Marcus as he left the hospital and headed to Ms. Thomas's apartment building. The manager was reluctant at first, but eventually gave Marcus the spare key after calling the hospital to confirm Ms. Thomas's request. Inside her apartment, everything was exactly as it had been yesterday, except for a small table that had been knocked over, probably when she collapsed. Marcus went straight to the desk and found the blue folder in the top drawer, just as she had said. He was tempted to open it right there, but he respected Ms. Thomas too much to invade her privacy. Whatever was in this folder, she wanted to share it with him personally. When Marcus returned to the hospital, he found Dr. Sharma waiting for him outside Ms. Thomas's room. "Mr. Williams," the doctor said, his expression serious. "While you were gone, Miss Thomas experienced another stroke, more severe than the first. We've had to place her in a medically induced coma to reduce the pressure on her brain." Marcus felt like the floor was disappearing beneath his feet. "Will she wake up?" "We're doing everything we can," Dr. Sharma replied. "The next 48 hours will be critical." Marcus looked down at the blue folder in his hands, wondering what important message it contained. As he sat by Ms. Thomas's bedside that night, watching her breathe with the help of machines, he couldn't imagine life without her guidance and friendship. Little did he know that the contents of that blue folder would reveal just how much he truly meant to Ms. Thomas, and how she had planned to change his life forever. For 5 days, Marcus barely left the hospital. He sat beside Ms. Thomas's bed, talking to her even though she remained in a coma. The doctors said familiar voices might help, So Marcus read to her from her favorite books that he brought from her apartment. Sometimes he told her about his day or shared memories of their conversations at the diner. The blue folder sat unopened in his backpack. Marcus couldn't bring himself to look inside without Ms. Thomas's permission. Whatever message she wanted to share, he felt it should wait until she could tell him herself. On the 6th day, Marcus arrived at the hospital to find unusual activity around Ms. Thomas's room. His heart raced as he rushed forward, fearing the worst. "What's happening?" he asked a nurse who was leaving the room. The nurse smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen in days. "She's awake. She started responding early this morning." Relief washed over Marcus like a cool wave. He entered the room to find Ms. Thomas propped up slightly on her pillows. She looked weak and tired, but her eyes were open and alert. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice rough from disuse. "I'm here," he said, moving quickly to her side. "I've been here every day." "I know," she said softly. "I heard you reading to me." Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes. "The doctors weren't sure if you would." "Wake up?" Ms. Thomas finished for him. "I'm tougher than I look." Despite her weak condition, her eyes sparkled with their familiar intelligence. "Did you bring the folder?" Marcus nodded and pulled it from his backpack. "I didn't open it. I wanted to wait for you." Ms. Thomas smiled. "Always so respectful. That's one of the many things I admire about you, Marcus." She gestured weakly toward the folder. "Open it now, please." With shaking hands, Marcus opened the blue folder. Inside were several official-looking documents, including what appeared to be legal papers. On top was a sealed envelope with his name written on it in Ms. Thomas's elegant handwriting. "Read the letter first," she instructed. Marcus carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. As he began to read, he felt his heart pounding in his chest. "Dear Marcus," the letter began. "If you're reading this, then I finally found the courage to tell you what I've been planning for some time. When my husband Richard died, I made a promise to myself that I would one day continue our dream of helping deserving students. In you, I have found not just a deserving student, but a kind and extraordinary young man who has brought light back into my life. The legal documents in this folder establish an educational trust in your name. This trust will fully cover your tuition, books, and living expenses while you complete your teaching degree. There are no conditions or strings attached. This is a gift, freely given, from someone who believes in you completely. Additionally, I have arranged for a separate fund to help your sister Tanya with her college expenses when the time comes. Your mother, who raised such wonderful children, will also receive assistance for her medical needs. My dear Marcus, you came into my life as a waiter, but you have become so much more. You have been my friend when I was lonely, my helper when I was weak, and my inspiration when I felt lost. Now, I hope to be the bridge that helps you cross over to the future you deserve." The letter was signed simply, "With love and gratitude, Eleanor Thomas." Marcus looked up from the letter, tears streaming down his face. "Miss Thomas, I can't accept this. It's too much." "It's not nearly enough," she replied, reaching for his hand. "Marcus, I never had children of my own. Let me do this, please. Let me help you the way you've helped me." "But why me?" Marcus asked, still stunned by her generosity. "Because," Ms. Thomas said, her eyes shining with emotion, "in a world where most people looked past an old woman in a wheelchair, you saw me, you truly saw me." That evening, as Marcus sat next to Ms. Thomas's bed, they talked about the future, his future as a teacher, her recovery, and the legacy they would build together. Neither knew what challenges lay ahead, but they faced them with a new bond that went beyond friendship. They had become family. 5 years passed since that emotional day in the hospital. On a bright spring afternoon, Marcus Williams stood in front of a classroom filled with 25 eager faces. At 33 years old, he was now Mr. Williams, a third-grade teacher at Parkside Elementary School. "Who can tell me what this story teaches us?" Marcus asked, closing the book he had just finished reading to his class. A small girl with pigtails raised her hand. "It teaches us to be kind to everyone, even when no one is watching." Marcus smiled. "That's exactly right, Sophia. Kindness matters, especially when no one is watching." As the school bell rang, the children gathered their backpacks and filed out of the classroom. Marcus erased the chalkboard and tidied up his desk. A framed photograph sat next to his computer, a picture of him and Ms. Thomas at his college graduation 3 years ago. She sat in her wheelchair, beaming with pride as Marcus stood beside her in his cap and gown. Miss Thomas's recovery had been slow but steady. She never regained full strength in her left side, but with therapy and determination, she had returned to her apartment and even started a small book club for retired teachers. Every Sunday, Marcus and his family visited Miss Thomas for dinner. His mother and Miss Thomas had become close friends, often exchanging recipes and gardening tips. Tanya, now in her second year of college studying nursing, always brought her textbooks to get Ms. Thomas's help with her essays. Today was a special Sunday. As Marcus drove to Ms. Thomas's apartment, he felt a mix of emotions. In his jacket pocket was a small box containing a gift he had been saving for months to buy. When he arrived, Miss Thomas was waiting in her usual spot by the window, watching for his car. Though now 72 years old, her mind remained as sharp as ever, though her body had grown more frail. "There's my favorite teacher," she called as he entered. Marcus bent down to hug her gently. "How are you feeling today?" "Well enough to have some exciting news," she replied with a mysterious smile. "What news?" Marcus asked, helping her wheel to the dining table where she had set out tea and cookies. Miss Thomas handed him a letter. "Open it." Marcus unfolded the letter and read it quickly, his eyes widening. "The Eleanor and Richard Thomas Scholarship Foundation has been approved." "Miss Thomas, this is amazing." She nodded, her eyes bright with happiness. "Yes, starting next fall, 3 students from low-income backgrounds will receive full scholarships to the university. And guess who will help select the recipients?" "Who?" "You, of course," she said. "Who better to recognize potential than someone who has lived it?" Marcus shook his head in amazement. "When you first left me that note in the hospital, I never imagined it would lead to all this." "Neither did I," Miss Thomas admitted. "I only knew I wanted to help one promising young man become a teacher. Now, because of your success, we'll help many more." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out the small box. "I have something for you too." Miss Thomas opened the box to find a beautiful silver brooch in the shape of an open book. Engraved on the pages were the words, "You changed my story." "Oh, Marcus," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "5 years ago today, you woke up in that hospital and shared your note with me," Marcus said, his voice full of emotion. "You said I saw you when others didn't, but you saw something in me that I couldn't even see in myself. You didn't just change my story, you helped me write a completely new one." As the afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, casting a golden glow over them both, Marcus thought about the chain of events that had brought them here. What had started as a simple customer-server relationship at Sunshine Diner had transformed into a bond that changed both their lives. Miss Thomas reached for his hand. "Do you remember that day when you first helped me at the diner? Cutting my sandwich into smaller pieces without my having to ask?" Marcus nodded. "I remember." "That's when I knew," she said simply. "Small acts of kindness reveal a person's true character." Outside, the city bustled with people rushing past each other, often not seeing those around them. But in that small apartment, 2 people from different generations, backgrounds, and life experiences had truly seen each other. And in that seeing, they had found family, purpose, and a legacy that would continue long after them. Sometimes the most life-changing notes aren't written on paper, but on the heart.